I come to the zucchini patch early, just as the sun begins to warm the morning dew. I carefully reach beneath a broad green leaf, where I laid a rolled-up newspaper yesterday evening. As I gently unroll the damp paper, a cluster of shiny brown earwigs scurries into view, tucked away in the creases. These little fellows can make quick work of a young garden, my friends, turning your tender plants into lace overnight. But this old trick costs nothing but a moment of your time, and it keeps them from taking over. This simple rolled newspaper trap is what I've used for years, and what my mother Sarah used before me to manage these night-feeding pests. I'll show you how to make and use this simple trap to protect your garden vegetables without needing any harsh sprays. We'll talk about who this method is best for, the most common mistakes folks make, and how you can tell if it's truly making a difference in your own rows. This isn't about eradicating every last earwig, but about keeping their numbers down so your plants can thrive. This approach works especially well for those of us with home gardens, or folks who prefer to grow their food organically. It's a gentle way to guard young seedlings and tender leafy greens, where earwig damage can be most noticeable and frustrating. However, if you're managing a very large commercial field, or if you find yourself overwhelmed by a truly severe infestation across many acres, this manual method might not be enough on its own. It's a daily task, not a set-and-forget solution, and that daily checking is key to its success. Still, for many gardens the payoff is clear. Significantly reduced earwig populations in your specific problem areas. That means less chewing on your lettuce, fewer holes in your zucchini leaves, and stronger, healthier plants overall. It's a low-cost, non-toxic way to keep your garden in balance without introducing anything that might harm the bees or the soil. It asks for a little consistent effort, but the peace of mind knowing your harvest is safe and that you're working with nature is a good reward. It asks for a little consistent effort, but the peace of mind knowing your harvest is safe and that you're working with nature is a good reward. I remember a time when I was just a small boy, maybe 6 or 7 years old, helping my mother Sarah out in her garden after a good spring rain. The air was cool and smelled of wet earth. Sometimes I would lift the loose flagstones from the path that ran between the rows of corn and beans. Underneath those stones, the ground was always dark and cool, just how the earwigs liked it. Often I'd find dozens of them, shiny and brown, all wriggling together. They carried with them that distinct, slightly musty smell of damp soil. Back then, they weren't causing any trouble under the stones. They were just hiding. But my mother knew, and I learned from her, that when the sun went down, these same little creatures would come out to do their mischief in the garden beds, chewing on young plant leaves. She used to say they were like little nocturnal hermits, always looking for a dark, damp spot to sleep away the day. And my mother, Sarah, was right about their ways. What generations of observant gardeners have seen, modern studies now confirm clearly. Earwigs are truly nocturnal creatures. They spend their daylight hours actively seeking out very specific kinds of shelter, places that are dark, moist, and narrow. They'll tuck themselves deep into crevices, under bark, beneath rocks, or even find refuge inside fallen leaves and garden mulch. This particular habit, their natural need for a secure, damp refuge from the harsh sun and any curious birds, is precisely what makes our simple newspaper trap so effective. It's not a complicated scientific invention, but rather a quiet understanding of how these little creatures live. By offering them an ideal hiding spot, we can gently draw them away from our tender plants, keeping the garden balanced and our vegetables growing strong. It's a way of working with the rhythms of nature rather than struggling against them. So, knowing that these little creatures love a dark, damp hiding spot, the beauty of this trap lies in its utter simplicity. It uses their own biology, their natural inclination, right to our advantage. Earwigs are out foraging and feeding under the cover of night. But when dawn comes, they start looking for somewhere safe and quiet to spend the daylight hours. They want a place that's dark, a little bit damp, and narrow to feel secure from the sun's heat and any birds looking for a morning meal. A loosely rolled up newspaper laid in the cool shadows of your garden offers exactly this kind of perfect daytime shelter. It becomes an irresistible invitation for them to crawl inside, settling in for their day's rest. This quiet method is an excellent fit for us home gardeners, especially those who cherish growing their food organically, or anyone who simply prefers to keep harsh chemical sprays away from their plants. It's particularly kind to young tender growth like seedlings, new lettuce, or bean sprouts, which are often the first to show the ragged hole damage from earwigs. It provides a way to protect these vulnerable plants without harming the good insects, like the bees buzzing around your zucchini blossoms. However, I must be plain with you. This isn't the solution for every garden. If you're tending to very large commercial fields, perhaps acres of vegetables, or if you find yourself with a truly overwhelming widespread earwig problem that's impacting every plant, this manual trapping method might not be enough on its own. It requires daily checking and resetting, which can be a good deal of work for a grand scale. It's about consistent, focused management rather than a set-and-forget solution. For those of us with smaller plots, though, the materials needed are as simple as can be. You won't need a trip to the store for anything special. Just some old newspaper, which Esther usually has folded neatly on the counter after yesterday's reading. A spray bottle with water, or even just a small watering can, will do to give the paper its necessary dampness. And finally, a small bucket or pail of soapy water for the safe and swift disposal of the earwigs once you've collected them. That's all there is to it. No fancy tools, just common household items put to good use. Making and setting up these traps is quite straightforward, really. First, you'll want to gather your newspaper. I usually pick up a few pages, maybe 2 or 3 sheets thick, from the stack Esther leaves for me by the kitchen door after her morning read. The newsprint, still smelling faintly of fresh ink, feels just right in my hands. There's no need for the whole paper, just enough to make a good functional roll. Then, take these sheets and roll them loosely into a tube, aiming for a tube that's about 4 to 6 inches long. Think of how you might roll a magazine or a small piece of cloth. You want it to have plenty of internal spaces, nooks, and crannies where those little earwigs can feel safe and hidden. It shouldn't be a tight, solid roll, but one that has air pockets and gentle folds inside. This provides the dark, narrow tunnels they instinctively seek out. Once you have your rolls ready, the next step is to give them a light dampening. I usually do this right at the well pump before heading into the garden. Just a quick dip or a splash from a watering can. You can also use a spray bottle if you have one handy. The paper shouldn't be soaking wet, mind you, or soggy enough to tear easily, but simply moist to the touch. You'll feel the paper soften a little, but it should never drip. The goal is to mimic the damp earth conditions that earwigs prefer for their daytime rest, making the trap even more appealing to them. This ideal dampness will also help the paper hold its shape a bit better through the night. Now, with your damp rolled newspapers in hand, it's time to place them out in the garden. You'll want to think like an earwig here. Look for the spots where you've noticed the most damage, those ragged holes in your lettuce, or the chewed edges of your young bean leaves. These are the places where the earwigs are most likely already feeding and seeking shelter nearby. Place the damp rolls directly on the soil, making sure they're nestled snugly. I often tuck them right under the broad leaves of a zucchini plant, or lay them along the rows of newly sprouted peas. You can also place them at the base of larger plants or along the edges of your garden beds, wherever you suspect they might be hiding. The best time to set these traps is in the late afternoon or early evening, just as the sun begins to dip and the earwigs are starting to stir and become active for their nightly foraging. By placing them then, you're offering the earwigs their ideal hiding place right when they're looking for it, just before they emerge from their existing daytime shelters to begin their evening's work. The very next morning, before the sun climbs too high and dries out the traps, you'll need to make your rounds and collect them. This daily check is truly the heart of the method. Walk quietly through your garden, gently picking up each rolled newspaper. Take care not to shake the rolls too much as you lift them, so the earwigs don't get startled and escape before disposal. You'll want to have your bucket of soapy water ready nearby. Just a squirt of plain dish soap in a gallon or so of water is plenty. Hold the roll carefully over the bucket. You can either gently unroll it, letting the earwigs tumble directly into the water, or simply tap the end of the roll firmly against the inside of the bucket. The important thing is that they fall into the soapy water. That bit of soap breaks the surface tension of the water so the earwigs can't swim out. They'll drown quickly. Some folks prefer to crush the earwigs, and that works too, but I find the water method is cleaner, and it doesn't leave any mess in the garden. Once you've emptied a roll, you can quickly re-dampen it and place it back in its spot for the next evening. This consistent daily routine, especially for a few weeks, is what truly helps to bring down their numbers. It's not just about one night's catch. It's about steadily reducing the population over time, which lessens the pressure on your plants day after day. Remember, every single trap you set must be checked and emptied, for any missed traps mean earwigs escaping right back into your precious garden, ready to feed again. That diligent checking is what makes the difference. Now, while this newspaper method is truly a blessing for many home gardens, it's good to be plain about its bounds and what it can realistically do. This kind of trapping is a fine tool for managing earwig numbers, especially in your vegetable rows, but it won't clear your garden of every single earwig overnight, nor is it meant to. If you're facing a truly vast, widespread infestation across many acres, or if you're a commercial farmer, this method will likely not be enough on its own. Think of it as a steady, ongoing task, like daily weeding, rather than a one-time fix that makes them all disappear. It asks for your presence and attention each day, which is a good thing in the garden, but it's not a set-it-and-forget-it solution. Another thing to consider is the weather. If you have a spell of consistent heavy rainfall, those damp newspaper rolls will quickly get too soggy and begin to break down. You'll find yourself needing to replace them more often than usual, perhaps every day or two, to keep them effective. But if the weather is mostly dry, a roll can last you a week or more with just a redampening. Just keep an eye on them and swap out any that start to look too flimsy. As for safety, this method is about as low risk as you can get. Since you're not using any chemical sprays, there's no worry about harming the busy bees in your squash blossoms, or the ladybugs munching on aphids, or even curious children and pets exploring the garden paths. You're simply giving the earwigs a place to hide. The main safety point, which I touched on earlier, is ensuring you dispose of the trapped earwigs properly. That bucket of soapy water is key. If you just toss them out onto the ground or into a dry compost pile, they're likely to crawl right back out and find their way back to your plants. Make sure they are thoroughly drowned in that soapy water so they don't simply escape or move to another spot in your yard. It's also wise to make sure any collected earwigs are well secured in the soapy water or poured into a ditch where the water will soak away rather than left where pets or other animals might get at them directly. While earwigs aren't harmful to eat, there's no need for your cat to be investigating your daily catch. This isn't a common worry, but it's part of being a good steward. If, after a week or two of consistent daily trapping, you still find a sudden overwhelming surge in earwig numbers, or if the damage to your plants is far more extensive than your traps seem to be able to keep up with, that might be a sign of a deeper issue. In such a case, it could be helpful to investigate other control measures. Your local agricultural extension office often has good counsel and can help you understand the broader solutions for particularly stubborn or widespread garden challenges. For most home gardens, though, with that steady daily attention, you should indeed see a noticeable reduction in plant damage within a week or two. Remember, patience and consistency are your best tools in the garden, and that holds true for this simple earwig trap, too. To truly know if this simple method is working its magic in your garden, a small bit of observation will serve you well. Before you even set your first trap, take a moment to look closely at a few of your most affected plants. Note the amount of ragged holes or chew marks on leaves and flowers. You might even pick a specific leaf to track, or count the number of damaged leaves you see on a particular plant that day. Then, after a solid week of consistent daily trapping and emptying, return to those same plants. You should begin to see less new damage appearing, meaning your efforts are starting to protect the tender new growth. Another clear indicator is the number of earwigs you're gathering each morning. If your catches start high and then steadily decrease over several days, it's a sure sign that you're making a real impact on the local population. Remember, the aim here isn't to clear every single earwig from your patch, but to manage their numbers enough so your vegetables can truly thrive and give you a good harvest. My dear mother, Sarah, always taught me that the quiet work of caring for a garden, whether it's through the patient act of weeding or the simple diligence of setting these traps, is a profound way of caring for your family and for the good earth itself. It's about being observant of nature's rhythms and working with what you have been given, rather than always reaching for a quick or costly fix. Each morning, as I lay out these damp newspaper rolls, I feel a quiet connection to those foundational lessons of stewardship. So I encourage you, go ahead and give this gentle, old method a try in your own garden this season. If you do, please share in the comments below what plants you were protecting, and perhaps how many earwigs your traps helped you collect. It's always good to learn from each other's experiences. Next time, we'll turn our attention to another simple matter that makes a big difference in the long run. We'll talk about a surprisingly simple way to keep your garden tools clean and rust-free, so they gleam ready for work season after season. Stay frugal, stay free.